me begin by thanking Sabeel for inviting me to be with you today. I always am inspired and excited by Sabeel conferences. I've been at a lot of them, and this one has particular resonance, partly because I live in DC, but for a number of other reasons. It's been a particularly important and good one, partly because of the times we are in. I don't actually want to speak very much about President Obama. I have plenty of things to say, but I'm not going to do that. I think that something that our friend Bernard said this morning, taking the lessons of the civil rights movement, is very, very important. And that is the question of identifying our goal, identifying a strategic approach to our work, knowing what is our goal. And I would say that our goal, those of us who live in this country, who pay taxes to this government, who maybe, if we're citizens, vote to elect people to this government, our strategic goal must be to change US policy towards the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's not our call. And I fully agree with Ali that one does not need to take a position on 2 states, 1 state, red state, blue state, 6 states. I have my own opinions, as you can imagine. And I've written about it for a long time as an individual. But that's not our role as a movement. I think that what we need to look at is not what President Obama is doing or not doing, which has plenty of problems connected to it. A little bit of hope and mostly problems. But we have to look at what we are doing. And I want to reference something that my friend Richard Falk said on Thursday night, when he said, particularly in light of the collapse at the United Nations of international support for the Goldstone report that was made possible by the Palestinian abandonment of support for that policy, for that report, which of course made it so much easier for the US and Israel to lead the campaign they were leading anyway, to undermine and bury that report, to ignore its recommendations. And what he said was, this is not the time for diplomacy. This is the time for civil society to rise. And that's where we come in. And one of the things that's so extraordinary about the Goldstone report, how many people here know, at least vaguely, what the Goldstone report is? Pretty much everybody? Good. The Goldstone report recommendations did something that no other UN report that I've ever heard about does. They make recommendations not only for what the Human Rights Council should do, send it to the Security Council, not only for what the Security Council should do, send these war criminals to the International Court of Justice, not only for what the General Assembly should do, send what the Security Council refuses to do, take it over and send them to the International Court of Justice, but it makes recommendations for what we as civil society should do, and what governments should do. So what should governments do? Governments, the Goldstone report says, should use the idea of what is known as universal jurisdiction. The point that says that some crimes, crimes against humanity, war crimes, are so serious that they are crimes against the world, and that any government with any kind of a court system has not only the right but the obligation to bring those potential war criminals to justice in their own national courts. And this is something that for years, for decades, people said, that can't happen, you know, what government is going to bring to trial some official in some other country? Well, we now have what's known as the Pinochet precedent, where General Pinochet, the former dictator, responsible for the deaths of thousands of Chileans and the torture and imprisonment of tens of thousands, was arrested in London on a Spanish warrant by a Spanish judge for crimes against humanity. Now that struggle isn't over yet. General Pinochet ultimately died at home before he could be brought to trial. But it transformed the world. It gave us the understanding that, yeah, that's possible. So the day before yesterday, when activists, our counterparts in London, went to a British jurist, a British judge, and said, here's the evidence against Ehud Barak, the defense minister of Israel, who was more than any one single person responsible for the siege and the assault on Gaza, the slaughter of people in Gaza. He's here in London and he must be arrested. They didn't succeed, but it took the judges 5 hours to debate whether they should arrest him. That's a huge victory. And it wasn't made possible by President Obama. It was made possible by civil society mobilization responding to a changing